told him that I'm leaving him to be with my lover. What he did next made me regret everything. Hello, Reddit. So, I'm here because I really need to get this off my chest and maybe get some insight on how to fix this. I'm absolutely torn up about what happened, and honestly, it's hard for me to even think about it without feeling like I'm going to have a breakdown. I've been struggling with this, and I don't even know where to begin. I guess you could say this post is part confession, part rant, and also part seeking advice. Maybe if I had someone to warn me earlier, to warn me to drop my mean-spirited friends before all this, I wouldn't be in this mess that I'm in now. Let me start with the basics. I got married about 6 months ago to the love of my life. At least that's how I felt at the time. We had been together for 7 years before we finally decided to tie the knot. I'm 34, he's 33. We were the perfect couple, or at least I thought we were. Everything seemed so right in the lead up to our wedding. I really believed that getting married would be the beginning of something even better. Something that would solidify everything we had worked so hard for. I know it's my fault, and that's the hardest part of all this. If I could just turn back time and do things differently, maybe things wouldn't have ended the way they did. But I can't. And so here I am, feeling like my entire world has crumbled because of some poor decisions I made. And the worst part is, I don't even know if I can fix it. I've lost so much, and I don't know where to go from here. So yeah, I guess you can say I'm hoping for some advice or maybe just a bit of understanding because right now, I'm drowning in regret. The thing is, I've always known that my friends were mean. I've always known that they had this sharp, sometimes cruel sense of humor, but for the longest time, I just let it slide. I guess I didn't think too much of it because, well, they were never mean to me. They were always pretty kind to me, or at least that's how it seemed. They'd make snarky comments about other people, gossip behind their backs, poke fun at things that, looking back, were honestly pretty awful. But it never really registered as a huge problem because they weren't doing it to me. I just kind of thought it was their thing, their way of bonding maybe. I told myself that they were just being blunt or honest, and that it wasn't personal. I convinced myself that this was just how they were, rough around the edges, and I didn't want to be the one to point it out, to call them out. But now I see how badly I had let this toxic behavior go unchecked. When Ben and I started dating, it should have been a wake-up call. I remember them being, well, pretty damn rude to him, but back then, I just brushed it off. I thought they were just testing him, or maybe being playful, and that he'd eventually get used to it. I thought that, like me, he'd see it as no big deal. I thought that eventually he'd laugh along with them, or at least learn how to ignore their barbs. But the truth is, I had been so used to their behavior for so long, I never took the time to actually think about how hurtful they were being. I mean, Ben wasn't like them. He wasn't sarcastic or jaded in that way. And I can see now how cruel it was for me to just expect him to get used to it. He's not the type of person who'd ever poke fun at someone's appearance or make backhanded comments about their lifestyle. And honestly, he deserves so much better than the way they treated him. But back then, I just kept telling myself it would pass. I didn't see how deeply it affected him because I was too wrapped up in the idea of keeping the peace, of maintaining my friendships. I guess in a way, I was so used to being part of that toxic circle that I never stopped to question it. I thought maybe if I just ignored it, it would all work itself out. Now, looking back, I realize how naive I was. I let them hurt someone I cared about, and I didn't do a damn thing about it. My friends were incredibly rude to Ben, and honestly, they continued to be throughout our entire relationship. At the time, I never really stood up for him, and looking back, I can't believe I let it go on for so long. They never really settled into our dynamic, always making little comments about him, or subtly putting him down whenever we were in a group, and I never called them out on it. I just kept quiet or joined in, brushing it off as if it was no big deal, because in a twisted way, I thought they were right. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? But that's the truth. It wasn't until later that I realized how deeply I had been influenced by my friends' behavior and how I had started to adapt to their toxic ideologies. When you spend so much time with people who are negative and judgmental, it starts to seep into your own way of thinking. It wasn't just about Ben anymore. It became about the company I kept. In a way, I became a mean girl too. There were countless instances where my friends would say something cruel or make fun of Ben, and instead of defending him, I would laugh along. I remember one time we were all sitting around at a bar, and Ben was just being himself. One of my friends, who was always the center of attention, started making fun of how boring he was. The whole table erupted in laughter, and I just sat there feeling awkward. Ben looked down at his drink, obviously uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. I didn't defend him. I just sat there silently. And it didn't stop there. As much as I wish I could say I took a stand and called out my friends, I didn't. When they mocked the way he dressed, the way he spoke, or the things he liked, I kept quiet. The mocking was relentless. They would make jokes about him being too quiet or too serious, or even criticize his job, like he wasn't ambitious enough. There were moments when I could see the hurt in Ben's eyes, when he'd retreat into himself, and I'd feel guilty. But somehow, I convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal. It was just their way of joking around, right? Everyone did it, didn't they? I guess the worst part of all this is that I joined in. There were times when my friends would make a comment about Ben, and instead of stopping them, I'd chime in with my own jab. It wasn't even a conscious decision, but more like a reflex, just falling into step with them. It wasn't even about Ben anymore. It was about me fitting in, about me not wanting to stand out as the person who was too soft or too sensitive about the jokes. I'd laugh and nod along, even when I knew it was hurting him. I wasn't just an innocent bystander, I was an active participant. It's crazy how it all unfolded, how things just spiraled out of control without me even realizing it. At first, it was just me apologizing to Ben every time my friends acted up. When they made fun of him, when they belittled him, I would pull him aside, apologize, tell him they didn't mean it, and promise that they'd get used to him. I tried to smooth things over, always deflecting his hurt with excuses, convincing him that it wasn't personal, that they were just being joking around or playing, that it wasn't that bad. In my mind, I was protecting him by making it seem less severe. But then, over time, I stopped apologizing as much. It wasn't a conscious decision at first, but I found myself justifying their behavior more and more. Eventually, it turned into me telling Ben that he was overreacting, that he was being too sensitive. I didn't even realize how much I'd shifted until I really sat down and started reflecting on it, trying to make sense of everything. At first, I would apologize for my friends' rude comments or their mocking jabs, trying to defend him, trying to make him feel like it wasn't his fault. But slowly, those apologies became fewer and fewer, and the justifications started creeping in. I started telling him that maybe he was just too sensitive, maybe they didn't mean it the way he thought, maybe he should just let it go. I don't know how it happened, but it was like I slowly became one of them. I was no longer standing up for him, no longer defending him. I was joining in. I can't believe how quickly that progression happened. One minute I was apologizing for my friends, trying to shield him from their cruelty, and the next I was belittling him right alongside them. I went from comforting him to telling him that he was making a big deal out of nothing. It feels like a blur, but the shame of it is crystal clear now. I see how wrong it all was, how much I hurt him, how much I became a part of the problem. And it's so fucked up that I didn't even see it happening. I was so caught up in wanting to fit in with my friends, in wanting to be accepted, that I stopped thinking about what really mattered, about Ben, about our relationship. I can see it now, the subtle shift, the way I got sucked in. At first, it was just little comments, the kind of things you think are just teasing or friendly jokes. They'd mock his appearance, his job, his hobbies, his height, his lack of social skills, and I'd laugh along. I'd dismiss it as harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was a slow erosion of his self-esteem, and I didn't care enough to stop it. I was too busy laughing with my friends, too busy fitting in, to notice that I was contributing to his hurt. And what's even worse is that I didn't just laugh passively. I joined in. I actively mocked him, belittled him, made jokes about his quirks and his kindness, about how he was too nice or too soft to be in our group. I made it seem like he wasn't enough, like his gentle nature was something to be made fun of, when in reality, it was one of the things I loved most about him. But I didn't see that then. I didn't see how fucked up it was. I thought that by making fun of him, I was just going along with the group, just being a part of the in crowd. I didn't stop to think about how my behavior was damaging our relationship, about how much it was hurting him. I didn't even see how deep the wound was, because I was too busy protecting my own image, too busy worrying about what my friends thought of me, to care about the person I was supposed to love and cherish. It's hard to admit, but I know it now. I wasn't just a bystander. I was an active participant in tearing him down. I thought I could get away with it, that it wouldn't matter, that he'd eventually get used to it. But it mattered. It mattered so much more than I realized at the time. I let my need to belong, to be accepted, cloud my judgment. And in the process, I lost sight of everything that should have mattered most. Ben's feelings, our relationship, our future together. So, we had just gotten married a few months ago. The wedding was amazing, or at least I thought it was. It was a beautiful, low-key celebration, everything I had dreamed of. My friends, who also happened to be my bridesmaids, were a huge part of the day, and I was so excited to have them involved. After the wedding, Ben and I went on our honeymoon, and it was absolutely magical. For a little while, everything felt perfect. When we got back home, my friends suggested that we all get together at our house for a fun evening. They pitched the idea of watching the wedding video together, having some drinks, chatting, and maybe even watching a couple of other movies after. I thought it was a great idea. I mean, why wouldn't it be? I was still riding the high of the wedding, and everything had seemed flawless. I didn't anticipate that this evening would turn into one of the most humiliating moments of my life. We all gathered in the living room, excited to watch the footage. At first, I was just thrilled to relive the memories of that day. But as the video started playing, something felt off. My friends, my bridesmaids, began whispering and giggling among themselves. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they were just excited or reminiscing about the day. But then I started catching bits and pieces of what they were saying. They weren't laughing about funny moments from the wedding. They were mocking Ben. It started with small comments about his appearance. They made snide remarks about his hair, his posture, even his smell, which didn't even make sense because Ben always smells amazing. But it didn't stop there. They began tearing apart everything about him. His speech during the reception, the way he walked, even the way he interacted with the guests. They said his wedding speech was awkward and that he was trying too hard. It was relentless. At first, I didn't know what to do. I just sat there frozen. Deep down, I felt so uncomfortable. But instead of standing up for Ben, I did the worst thing imaginable. I joined them. I didn't make the harshest comments, but I laughed along. I dismissed their remarks as jokes. I thought if I just played it cool, we could get through the evening, and it would all blow over. I convinced myself it wasn't that serious, that it was all just harmless fun. But the truth is, it wasn't harmless. It was cruel, and I participated in it. Ben was sitting right there the whole time. I could see the discomfort on his face. I could feel the tension building in the room. I wanted to stop it, to say something, but I didn't. I let it continue. I even laughed at some of the things they said. At the time, I thought I was just going along with the group, keeping the mood light, but now I see it for what it really was. I was betraying him. Then, Ben did something I'll never forget. He stood up, walked over to the TV, and turned it off. The room went silent. He looked at my friends, his voice calm but firm, and told them that their mean-spirited behavior was the reason none of them were married and why all their relationships had failed. It was a brutal truth, and he didn't hold back. My friends were stunned. I could see the anger and embarrassment on their faces. It was no secret that my being the first to get married was a sore spot for them, and Ben's words hit a nerve. He told them to leave, and they did. Then he turned to me, looked at me with a look of disappointment and hurt, and walked away. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just went to bed. The next day, I tried to talk to him, to explain myself, to apologize, but he ignored me. He said he wasn't ready to talk and that he needed time. For the next week, he barely spoke to me. The house was filled with this unbearable tension. My friends didn't reach out, and honestly, I didn't have it in me to apologize to them either, because, deep down, I knew Ben was right. After about a week of silence, Ben finally approached me and said we needed to talk. I was relieved. I thought he was ready to forgive me, that we could start to move past this. But instead, he told me he was done. He said he couldn't do this anymore, that he couldn't stay married to someone who didn't have his back, who not only let her friends mock him, but joined in. He told me the wedding had been humiliating for him, that he'd felt judged and ridiculed the entire day, and that my friend's behavior, and my lack of action, was just the culmination of years of him feeling like he was never enough in my eyes. I begged him to reconsider. I begged him to give me a chance to make things right, but he was firm. He said the damage was done, that he couldn't unsee how I had treated him, and that he deserved better. He told me he would give me 2 weeks to get my things together and move out. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose him. I know this is all my fault, that I let him down in the worst possible way. But if there's any way to fix this, to make him see that destroying our marriage isn't the answer, I'll do whatever it takes. I feel completely lost. Reddit, please, I need your advice. How do I even begin to fix something this broken? Update. Hello, Reddit. The feedback I received here was eye-opening, to say the least. So many people pointed out how ridiculous I had been, how wrong I was, and honestly, reading through the comments was brutal. But I needed it. Every single one of them forced me to face just how insane the entire situation truly was. First of all, let me address the elephant in the room. I've cut my friends off. Yep, completely and absolutely. I exited the group chat after sending a lengthy, detailed message tearing into every single one of them. I told them to take a long, hard look in the mirror and face the ugly, bitter human beings they had become. I told them that Ben was better than all of them put together, and called out their behavior for what it was, petty, mean-spirited, and downright cruel, and then I blocked them, every single one of them. I'm not proud of a lot of things right now, but I'm damn proud of that. I should have done it years ago. I just wish I'd realized sooner how toxic they were. But hindsight is 20/20ths, right? As cathartic as it was to cut them off, it didn't magically fix anything. I hoped that taking this step would show Ben that I was serious about changing, that I was willing to fight for us. I even suggested therapy or couples counseling, but he's not budging. He's done. Completely, utterly, heartbreakingly done. Reality hit like a freight train when I got served the divorce papers. That was the moment it truly sunk in. We're over. I can't describe the feeling. It's this hollow, sinking sensation in your chest, like the ground beneath you has disappeared. I'd been holding on to this shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could work things out. But seeing those papers made it clear. There's no going back. Now, I'm back at my parents' house. Let me tell you, this is not where I imagined myself at this point in my life. I hadn't lived with them since college, and the idea of moving back was always this distant, hypothetical, worst-case scenario. Yet here I am, at 34, unpacking my bags in my childhood bedroom. It feels surreal and humiliating. My parents are trying to be supportive, but I can tell they're disappointed. They don't say it outright, but I see it in the way they look at me, like they're wondering how I let my life spiral out of control like this. Work has become unbearable. I'm a zombie, just going through the motions. I can barely focus, and I know my performance is slipping. My boss has already commented on how off I've seemed lately, and it's only a matter of time before things get worse. I'm terrified of losing my job on top of everything else, but I can't seem to pull myself together. It's like every ounce of energy is being sucked out of me. The worst part is knowing this is entirely my fault. Ben didn't deserve any of this. He deserved a wife who would stand up for him, who would love and support him unconditionally. Instead, I let my toxic friends dictate how I treated him. I joined in their cruel jokes. I dismissed his feelings. And now I've lost him. The fact that the divorce papers came so quickly makes me think he's been preparing for this for a long time. He must have been quietly planning his exit while I was obliviously wrapped up in my friend's approval and my own selfishness. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing myself along with my marriage. I still love Ben, and I don't want to give up on us, but it's clear he's already given up on me. Is there any way to come back from this? Or do I just have to accept that I've destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me? If anyone has advice, anything at all, I'm begging you. How do I even begin to rebuild my life after this? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been a while since my last update, and honestly, I've been too ashamed to come back here. I didn't want to admit how bad things have gotten or how much worse my life is now compared to before. I thought I'd hit rock bottom after the divorce, but apparently there's always a new low waiting just around the corner. So, to catch everyone up, the divorce has been finalized. I'm no longer married to Ben, and that reality has shattered me in ways I never imagined. I didn't want to let go. I still love him, and I held on to hope even when it was clear he was done. But the papers came, the signatures were signed, and that was that. It's over. Completely painfully over. And I have no one to blame but myself. After the divorce, my life went into a tailspin. Karma, I guess, had been biding its time, and when it hit hard. Not long after the divorce, I got fired from my job. They said my performance had dropped too much, and honestly, they weren't wrong. I was barely functioning. I was showing up late, missing deadlines, and zoning out during meetings. They gave me a severance package, but it wasn't enough to keep me afloat for long. Since then, I've been on an endless cycle of interviews, trying to get another job in my field, but nothing has worked out. Every rejection feels like another nail in the coffin of the life I used to have. The only work I've been able to find is minimum wage, and it's nowhere near enough to cover my bills. I've taken up jobs I never thought I'd have to do, including being a live-in nanny, which I ended up getting fired from too. My parents took me in for a while after the divorce, but even their patience ran out. They tried to be supportive, but eventually they grew tired of my constant moping and self-pity. I'd gained a lot of weight, around 180 pounds, because all I did was eat to numb the pain. When you're unemployed and depressed, food becomes a coping mechanism. But instead of making me feel better, it just made everything worse. My parents finally kicked me out, and I found myself homeless. Yes, homeless. Me, living on the streets, scrounging for food, sleeping wherever I could. It was a nightmare I wouldn't wish on anyone. Eventually, I managed to scrape together enough for a tiny apartment. Calling it an apartment feels generous. It's more like a glorified closet. But it's better than the streets, and I've learned to be grateful for small mercies. Plus, I'm barely living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. Every cent I make goes toward rent, bills, and cheap food to get me through the day. The idea of affording anything extra, let alone a gym membership or personal trainer, is laughable. People love to tell you, oh, you don't need a gym to lose weight, you can work out at home, like they think it's that easy. But here's the thing. When you're exhausted from working long hours at a dead-end job that barely covers your basic needs, the last thing you have the energy for is a workout. And when your meals consist of dollar menu junk food because fresh produce and healthy options are too expensive, where do they think the motivation comes from? I don't have the luxury of buying kale smoothies or organic chicken breast. I'm eating canned spaghetti and frozen fries because that's all I can afford. It's a vicious cycle. Cheap food makes me gain weight, and gaining weight makes me miserable. But I can't afford to eat better or do anything about it. And let's not forget how isolating it is. I don't have anyone cheering me on, no friends to work out with or talk to. I'm doing this all on my own, and it feels impossible. Losing weight is so much more than just exercise. It's about mindset and support, and I don't have either. So, yeah, how am I supposed to afford the gym when I can barely afford to live? How am I supposed to prioritize my health when every day feels like a battle just to survive? People say, just try harder. But trying is hard when you feel like you're sinking and there's no one around to throw you a lifeline. I'm tired all the time, both physically and emotionally, and the idea of starting a workout routine feels impossible. Meanwhile, Ben is thriving. He's doing great, and honestly, it hurts so much to see him move on while I'm stuck in this pit of despair. I don't blame him. I know I did this to myself. But that doesn't make it any easier to stomach. Knowing that he's happy while I'm miserable feels like the ultimate punishment. So here I am, miserable, overweight, underemployed, and barely scraping by. My life is nothing like I imagined it would be, and I have no idea how to turn things around. I don't know if there's even a way to come back from this. All I know is that I'm tired of being stuck, tired of being alone, and tired of being the person who destroyed her own life. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know why I let myself become that person. But I do know that I am deeply ashamed of the way I acted, of how I contributed to his pain, of how I allowed my friends to shape my behavior at the expense of the man I loved. I can never forget how wrong I was. I have to live with that. And the worst part, the part that keeps me up at night, is realizing how many chances he gave me. He tried. God, he tried to talk to me about it so many times. He sat me down, told me how much it hurt him when I mocked him in front of my friends, how it chipped away at his self-esteem every time I laughed at his expense. He told me how drained he felt, how unsupported and unloved. He told me he hated how I never defended him when others joined in, how I would just sit there and let it happen, and worse, how I never let him defend himself either. I always shut him down, told him to stop being dramatic or making a scene. He told me how small it made him feel, like he didn't matter, like his feelings didn't matter. And do you know what I did? I brushed it all off, every single time. I'd roll my eyes, tell him he was overreacting, that he was being too sensitive, that he needed to learn how to take a joke. I gaslit him, essentially. I made him feel like he was the problem, when the truth was, I was the one hurting him. I thought I was being funny, that it wasn't a big deal. I convinced myself that he'd get over it, that it was harmless teasing. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't funny. It was cruel. I made the man I claimed to love feel insignificant, and when he tried to tell me how much it hurt him, I laughed in his face. And now here I am, sitting in this tiny, suffocating apartment, with nothing but my regrets and the silence of my own making. I see it so clearly now, how much I failed him, how I let my insecurities and immaturity ruin everything. But the clarity doesn't help. If anything, it makes it worse because I know it's too late. I can't go back and fix it. I can't take back the words I said, the jokes I made at his expense, or the moments I dismissed him when he needed me the most. I broke him down piece by piece until there was nothing left, and now I'm left with nothing too. This is the bed I made, and now I have to lie in it, alone. I don't even know why I'm posting this. Maybe I just needed to get it all out. Maybe I'm hoping for advice. Or maybe I'm just looking for someone to remind me that it's not over, that there's still a chance to make things better. I don't know. But if you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I needed to say it, even if I'm not sure what I want to hear.
They say true friends are great riches, but the only thing I've done is bring poverty to my best friend's life. I'm not speaking literally, I'm just trying to say that I have done something that is way too disgusting, and I don't know if I'm just a traitor or a heartless human, but my best friend is at fault too because she very much lied to me. I guess what's going on is just as a result of the seeds she planted. If she had been honest with me from the start, this would not have happened. As I'm writing this, my best friend's husband is lying right next to me on the bed, and he's watching me. I told him I needed time to think after we had a very important conversation this morning. If you're wondering what he's doing in the same room with me, he's naked. We spent the night together. In fact, we have spent many nights together. Hi Reddit, my name is Camila, and I'm a 24-year-old dietitian. I'm not married, I'm single. I live in Los Angeles, California, in a rented apartment. I have a lot of friends. I'm the perfect definition of a social butterfly, and it's a title I carry so well. But amongst my many friends is my best friend, Tiana. Tiana and I met in college, and we've been inseparable ever since then. In fact, Tiana got married just 8 months ago to a real estate agent. His name is Davidson, and he's extremely rich. Back then in college, Tiana and I always spoke about our dream marriage and how we couldn't just wait to get married. I'm sure I'm not the only one that had a best friend who we could say those types of things to. Tiana and I even got an apartment together after we were done from college, but we decided to take separate apartments when we realized that it would be difficult for us to maintain our friendship when we lived together. Not all best friends live together, and I think I realized that it was what was best. When we lived together, we were constantly having arguments and disagreeing a lot, so we decided to have separate apartments in order to maintain the peace and harmony we had for each other. Tiana works at a fashion store, so we don't really get to see each other very often. That's why we decided to go on a group vacation with the rest of our friends. When Tiana got married, I was the chief bridesmaid as expected. I didn't know her husband until I saw him on the wedding day. She never seemed to talk about him until 2 months before they got married. I found that quite weird since we usually talked about everything. But I still showed up for her because she's my best friend, and I wanted to be there for her on her wedding day. Even my big brother and little sister tried to talk me out of it because they felt like she disrespected me by not telling me, but I didn't listen. I wanted to be there for her, but when I saw her husband some hours before the wedding, I immediately understood why she kept everything from me. Before I go on, and in case some people would ask me why I was so surprised and why I didn't ask to see his pictures before the wedding, let me put it out there that she never showed his face when she sent me pictures. She always showed pictures of him hiding his face while wearing a hoodie and came up, with the excuse of him not being a photogenic person. I always believed her because I've also been with guys that just don't want to take pictures because they didn't like it. But when I saw Davidson, I knew that Tiana had been lying to me. If she had called his full name, I would have known. She just called him by his middle name, which I can't mention here. While Tiana and I were in college, we usually attended nightclubs together. During one of those crazy nights out, Davidson asked for my phone number. He wasn't a student like me, and he came with his colleagues. I told him to hold on, and I ran to Tiana to ask for advice. I was used to the both of us sharing ideas and giving each other advice. When I told him he didn't seem like a student and cake with his colleagues from work, she advised me not to share my phone number with him because she felt like men like him were predators who exploited college students. I told her he looked like he was around our age and was good looking, but she told me to forget it. I listened to her before going to get myself another drink. I never returned to his table. So I was surprised to know that Tiana was getting married to the same guy that asked for my phone number. I almost lost consciousness because everything happened too fast and I was just too confused. I couldn't believe that Tiana would do that to me. She lied to me. That was the only reasonable explanation. I didn't dare Davidson or ever see him after that day, but I recognized his face and name. That's because Tiana and I always spoke about that particular incident. Davidson didn't notice me, so I walked away and tried looking for Tiana. But it was already time for the wedding, and the priest had already walked into the church. I had to go stand beside the other bridesmaids and wait for Tiana to walk in. I had questions I was desperate for answers, but I had to follow the protocol and act calmly. I didn't want to cause a scene at my best friend's wedding, and I didn't want to get on her nerves, so I decided to wait till I heard her side of the story. Well, her side of the story didn't come till later that day. As for Davidson, he was very shocked when our eyes met and he raised his brows. I could tell that he had recognized my face. How could he not? He danced with me for a good 30 minutes before he finally asked for my phone number. We had a conversation and I wanted to give him my phone number, but I just wanted to tell my friend first. She ended up discouraging me, and that's why the both of us ended up not ever meeting again. Until his wedding day, of course. Throughout the wedding ceremony, Davidson kept staring at me, and I could tell that Tiana became very uncomfortable. I guess she could feel my eyes at the back of her neck even when I helped her arrange her gown. She couldn't look me in the eyes. If you ask me, it was like a scene straight out of the movie. Everything that happened was just too unreal, and the level of discomfort that wedding gave me is actually crazy. Fast forward till after the wedding, and before the reception, I pulled Tiana to the side to have a conversation because I'd been itching to speak to her. I urgently needed to know why she had been ignoring me all of a sudden, and why she was acting weird. Of course, I knew that she felt uncomfortable because of my very short history with Davidson, but I never jumped to conclusions. I wanted to speak to her first, and that's why I pulled her to the side. I started off by asking her why she was avoiding her contact with me, and she told me she was just nervous and the wedding stuff was getting to her. I called her down, then asked her why she didn't tell me that she got married to the same guy I met at the nightclub while we were in college. Ladies and gentlemen, you all needed to see how Tiana just decided to feign innocence. Now that I know the truth and what really happened, I can't help but praise her acting skills and condemn myself for being so gullible yet again. She acted so surprised, almost as if she had just heard the name before. She asked me what I was talking about, and I told her that Davidson was the same guy that asked for my phone number in the club while we were in college. I even had to add to the fact that Davidson was the real estate agent we kept talking about. She gasped and shook her head before telling me she had no idea he was the sake person. She told me she didn't know that Davidson was the one that asked for my phone number. According to her, she kept Davidson at her workplace when he came to get some clothes. I believed her back then, but now I think I am just really stupid. She pulled a Ronaldo live story on me. Seriously? She happened to meet a real estate agent who came to get some clothes, and he had to be the same person she warned me never to get with. Back then, I didn't even hold a grudge or get angry because at the end of the day, I knew that coincidences happened and there was every possibility that she was telling the truth. I also didn't think it was a big deal because Davidson and I never got in a relationship. We never even saw each other after that day, so I didn't think there was any need for me to be angry with her. I asked her why she hid his photos, and she told me she only did that because he was not the photogenic type. Case closed, and that's all that happened that day. So it was quite surprising for me when I found out the truth just 1 month ago, but let me not get ahead of myself, guys. I don't want to leave out the important details because at the end of the day, I need to tell the truth. After the wedding, Tiana practically ghosted me. I'm not joking. I'm being 100% honest. She ghosted me and tried to make it look like we were having issues. It was difficult to see her and even have coffee together like we used to do. Seeing my best friend literally became a unicorn sighting. I didn't think it was an issue at first because I knew that it was 100% normal for couples to spend quality time together. But I discovered that she was just trying to make sure I didn't see Davidson. It was like a riddle to me, and I kept asking myself if I did something that would warrant such a behavior from my own best friend. It was at that moment that I remembered the fact that I realized that she might have been hiding him because of what I told her on their wedding day. I concluded that she didn't want to put the both of us in an uncomfortable situation when we dated before. Finally, she contacted me 2 months ago, and we started frequently again. I told her how angry I was for what she did, and she apologized, so we got back to talking and our friendship was back to normal. But I began to have little doubts here and there because of the way she treated me before. I just felt like she'd been a bad friend and I couldn't fully trust her. I also thought that she started acting out because she felt I was single, and she was married, so there wasn't supposed to be a relationship like before. I also noticed that she worked tirelessly to make sure I never came in contact with her husband. Unfortunately for her, all her efforts were in vain because just 1 month ago, I stumbled upon Davidson at my workplace. Yes, it was just a coincidence, Lowell. I'll be honest, I planned it. I wanted to meet him there, and I had to pull some tricks to get him to come to the place where I worked as a dietitian. I needed to find answers because I just couldn't understand why Tiana was behaving that way. Something told me that there had to be more to that story or else she wouldn't have been acting the way she was acting. When Davidson arrived, I pulled him to the side and asked to have a conversation with him. He was very shocked when he saw me, and I could tell that he didn't expect to see me there. At first, he just stared at me and said nothing before he finally asked me how I was doing. Are you kidding me? I was very surprised that he asked me that question. I kept wondering why he asked that question. I know that it's just a normal question and people ask themselves that all the time, but I never knew that he would ask me that. That's what made me realize that he actually remembered my face and knew who I was. I couldn't believe that he still remembered me after all those years, so I didn't try to hide my surprise. Davidson asked me if I already had something to eat, and I told him I'd not had anything to eat yet. He asked if I had time to go get coffee with him, and I told him I did. I really wanted us to have time to talk because I knew that there was no way I would have time to speak to him one-on-one again. There was no time for me to even see him in his wife's presence, so I needed to see him personally. He has a car, so he drove me there. But I was surprised when we ended up driving into a restaurant. I didn't expect him to actually take me to a restaurant, not a cafe. I didn't say anything, though. I just followed him because I was hungry. Guys, you all need to see how he was actually very nice. He opened the car door and treated me with a lot of respect. When we sat down and got ready to eat after taking our orders, he asked me what I wanted to talk about. I suddenly got nervous, so I told him I'll speak when I'm ready. He didn't rush me, and then we just ate in silence. After eating, he asked me if I still remembered his face. I laughed at that and told him I still remembered him. He then asked me why I didn't give him my number while I was in college. I was shocked that he still wanted to know the answer to that. But before I made the move to tell him the truth, I wanted to hear from him first. Tiana was still my best friend, so I didn't want to potentially say something that could cause problems in her marriage. I just wanted to know the truth on my own terms without causing any drama. So guys, I asked him to tell me how he ended up marrying my best friend before I told him the truth. That's when my world literally shattered and I knew that I'd been deceived. I realized that I had been holding on to a fake friendship, and the person I'd traveled to go support on her wedding day ended up backstabbing me. If a person is so close to you that they are ready to ask for your opinion on simple things like giving a guy your phone number, you should know that they really consider you their friend. That's why it really hurt me to find out from Davidson that after he waited and didn't find me at the club, he just decided to wait for me for some time because his friends suggested he waited. Then he told me Tiana walked up to him and told him I wasn't able to come because I had a boyfriend. So my best friend, who I trusted so much, ended up giving him her phone number, and then they were in contact without my knowledge. The fact that she always referred to that incident and kept joking about it just infuriated me. I couldn't believe that my own best friend could do that to me, and that made me extremely angry. Even Davidson noticed how angry I was, and he asked me if I wasn't aware of everything all along. I didn't have any reason to stay loyal to Tiana because it was obvious to me that she hadn't been loyal to me. I told him that Tiana warned me not to go meet him that day. He was also surprised because obviously we had two different stories. Even though I was angry, I didn't want any drama, so I told him there was no need to speak to her about it. I didn't wait to taste the cocktail he ordered. I just hid him goodbye and tried leaving the restaurant. Yes, Guy, I wanted to leave because I was just tired and upset. I needed to go back to work and just cool off. I'd already spent a lot of time having lunch with him, so I needed to get back to work. But before I left, he asked me for my phone number again. I told him there was no reason for us to exchange contacts and that it would do us no good, but he told me that it was something he wanted to do. Davidson told me that he wanted to be able to contact me as much as he wanted. I hurriedly gave him my phone number before I left the restaurant. After leaving that day, he was always in contact with me. He asked me out many times and even tried to take me out on dates. At first, I tried to ignore him and resist all the temptations, but I gave in at the end of the day and decided to give it a try. Yes, I practically betrayed my best friend by doing that, but even though I tried to pretend, I couldn't stomach the fact that she did what she did, and then when I asked her about it on her wedding day, she lied through her teeth and made a fool out of me again. If she had said the truth and didn't try to go around hiding the truth, I would have forgotten about it. The fact that she just made sure she lied to me and tried to keep me and Davidson from meeting because she knew that we'd find out the truth eventually. One day, during one of our hangouts, things got out of hand, and Davidson ended up taking me to a hotel. We slept together and spent the whole night together. Tiana kept calling his phone, but he didn't pick it up. After I slept with him, I felt bad, but whenever I remembered what Tiana did to me, I always told myself I was doing the right thing. The both of us had planned a vacation, and we were in contact with the rest of our friends. We were all supposed to bring our partners, and she told me she was also going to bring Davidson. I said I would come single, and I did. Before the vacation, Davidson told me he'd always asked Tiana to set us up even before they started dating, but she always said that I had a serious boyfriend and was likely going to get married. I kept all those things in mind till we finally went on the vacation. I didn't tell Tiana about it, and I never told her I'd been sleeping with her husband. We booked a hotel, and her room was almost directly opposite mine. Davidson and I acted like strangers in front of her, and I was sure she thought he didn't remember me. I knew that I was doing something horrible, but whenever I remembered that I could have been the one who got married to him, I just couldn't hold it any longer. There were many activities during the group vacation, but just yesterday they went camping in the mountains. I told them I wouldn't be able to go because I was tired. While I was alone in the room, Davidson suddenly came into the room. It was already late in the night by that time, and I asked where the others were. He said they were still camping and wanted to spend the night there. I got scared that we might get caught, so I asked him why he came back. He said he lied to have gotten a business call and told Tiana he needed to work all night. That's how we ended up spending the night together, and that's how he ended up naked on the bed right now. He told me just now that he wants us to take things to the next step and he wants to divorce Tiana. I told him I need time to think about it. Oh, hold on, I have to go, guys. Someone just knocked on the door. I hope we've not gotten caught. Update. Evil can never fight evil, and now I know I've been fooling myself. I've been so foolish to think that I could get back at my best friend by sleeping with her husband. Now karma has dealt with me, and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. When I told you guys that someone knocked on the door, it was Tiana. Yes, guys. Apparently, she got suspicious that both of us were missing and decided to get back to see what we were up to. I think I let my guard down, and I should have thought about that because she has always been suspicious of us. When I opened the door, she was right there, and she didn't need a seer to tell her exactly what happened. She slapped me immediately and started a fight. It was Davidson that ended up separating us. I laughed in her face and called her a traitor for lying to me, and then she called me a fool for depending on her. It was crazy, and I couldn't believe that two ladies that were once best friends had grown so far apart that they called themselves disgusting names. It was not a nice sight to see, and I honestly felt like trash. But at the end of the day, I knew that what I did to her was unforgivable and what she did to me was unforgivable. I left the hotel that same day after packing my things. I saw no reason to stay anymore. I didn't feel bad at first because I felt like Davidson would end up choosing me at the end of the day. I was relaxed and waited for him to serve her divorce papers. But like all bad people, I didn't get a happy ending. He sent me a message via text and told me he couldn't leave Tiana because she threatened to file for divorce first and take half of his property if he left her. He also told me that she threatened to tarnish his image and ruin his name. I tried to make him understand that she was just trying to get into his head, but he blocked me after warning him never to contact him. It was at that moment I realized that he was just making excuses and was never really serious to begin with. He just wanted to get under my pants by making false promises. He knew he couldn't get divorced because he didn't want to ruin his image by having a marriage that didn't last a year. For me, it burned so hard because I realized that I'd wasted my integrity only to end up being embarrassed at the end of the day. It burned really hard and my karma hit very hard. The fact that even after all she did, Tiana won, still breaks my heart. But I'll call a spade a spade. I had it coming.